So that's the hot take. Xbox will probably go the way of Sega, right? Sort
The
of sell some
wildest
of it off.
conversation I was not ready for at 11 a.m.,
Yeah,
man.
listen. I'm
Um,
back. I'm back from the beach. I'm ready. Let's go.
oh man, I mean, it feels correct, right? Like putting my like long form, multi-decade game history hat on. This is not some sort of like innovative moment where Xbox is going to reinvent it all. I don't feel that. I feel like
Hmm.
this is the beginning of a great unspooling. Welcome to Unboxing, Play and Profit for the Gaming Curious. I'm Lane Nooney.
And I'm Joost van Dreunen.
And we're here digging deep on why games matter in today's economy. On the docket today, Friday, February 27th. First, we'll preview what's coming down the pipe for our hosts at GDC, and then on to the only thing anyone wants to talk about. What's up at Xbox? C-suite changes, AI slop fears, and what's it mean for the future of America's only hardware manufacturer? All that and more with your two very snowed-in co-hosts, but first, we've got some catching up to do. Yost, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. How's it going, Lane?
Snowed in? Can you get out your front door?
I got snowed in, but not until after I came back from the beach.
Mm.
I spent some time in the DR reheating my soul and thawing my children. Like, listen, it's been crazy. Like, I've been watching patiently out my window because I have to shovel and salt the earth around my house. And you're just like, oh, let me just do it at 11 at night. It'll be fine. And then the next morning, it's just a foot of snow.
Yes.
I
The
mean,
struggle of property ownership, you know. I've
it's
been
really
watching
terrifying.
icicles fall off my windowsill. That's where I've been. Um,
Any
Yost,
any hits?
I'm a little too high up to tell. But I did wonder if an icicle falling from the 22nd floor could like injure a dog below. I almost asked ChatGPT and I was like, save the water, kid.
Actually, so there's a bunch of big buildings here downtown Brooklyn, and they have like the sidewalk is half sectioned off,
Oh,
and you
like
see a
icicle
bunch of these like
catchment?
maintenance. Yeah, it's like you see a bunch of these maintenance guys like furiously shoveling because it's just all coming down out of this like warming up. It's dangerous out there. Please be safe.
I know. Well, you know where it's going to be maybe a little bit warmer and not so dangerous?
Mm.
GDC in San Francisco
Ah,
in a couple weeks, right?
very exciting.
So when is that? That is popping off. Let me check my calendar. Man, in 1 week,
March.
I got some slides to put together. Um,
Hey, tell me, what's the deal with GDC? Are you back doing your annual shtick? What's happening? What's on the program?
yes, my annual shtick. So I'm on the program formally for two events. First, yeah, we're bringing back me and Phil Salvador collabing once again. Phil from the Video Game History Foundation on What's New in Game History 2026, which
Hmm.
remains one of GDC's best reviewed panels. We're bringing in some new folks this year: Wes Fenlon from PC Gamer, Trandria Russworm, who will be talking about the Black Games Archive. And so, yeah, we're going to be doing our annual lowdown debrief on what's all the new stuff in game history across publishing, institutional initiatives, fan collectives, stuff like that. So where that is Monday at 4:30. A little stinky to get the Monday slot because I think in before this new festival of games branding, those were kind of those were when summits happened, and so they were not seen as part of I think the big show. And so
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of people's sense memory of GDC is still as a thing where the real party starts on Wednesday.
Hmm.
But we're gonna roll with it. Jason Scott is going to be our moderator, so he's always an amazing time. And then on Wednesday, March 11th, this is very cool. 3 to 4, I'm going to be on the GDC Side Quest podcast live colon state of the industry game panel. And so this is going to be a conversation happening between me, Ben Porter at Newzoo, and Liam Dean at
I know Ben.
Omdia, where we're going to be talking about the GDC State of the Industry report. I'm there kind of as the person who was the outside consultant on kind of rebuilding that, and it's gonna be moderated by Beth Elderkin, who is the person in marketing who puts that report together. So, and that'll
Hmm.
get
Hmm.
cut up and edited into a podcast. So I'm on the schedule twice, which is pretty cute. What about you?
I am on the schedule 0 times, the official GDC activities. I am
Yeah,
doing
you'll be the real GDC activities.
you always remind me of this. It's like, where's the real power in a crowd, in a room? And like when you look at GDC, like the venture people, the Andreessen Horowitzes and the makers funds of the world, they host parties on Sunday nights and Monday, right? And so me and my banker friends, we do this. We have a happy hour on Monday. That's the main event for me. I fly in Monday morning. I do a talk at the CEO Cabal, which is a sort of GDC adjacent event where they rent out this art gallery, have a bunch of talks and some happy hour. I come and do a preview of my South by Southwest talk. It's only 20
Okay.
minutes or 30 minutes or so, but it's always fun because they're all studio heads and people that spent their whole career making games, producing games. Then the happy hour in the evening. I assume you got your invitation, but it's from 6 to 9,
Yep.
and and that's my main tentpole. Then on Tuesday I have a few meetings and fancy lunch. I have a dinner at the CEO Forum, which is one of these things sponsored by Lightspeed Venture Partners and McKinsey and a bunch of banks, and that's where the Phil Spencers hang out.
Wow. Do you
So
need a
so
date?
I don't know. I'd love a date. I don't know if I could take a plus one because I imagine there's going to be a lot of security around this.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I saw the pictures from last year. So this is pretty like this is fancy thing, but it's there's always so those are the to your point the events that take place Monday, Tuesday historically,
yeah.
and then the conference actually starts. And I
That's
think
where
that
the
just
power
moves.
brokering really happens
That's
at
exactly right.
GDC, right? And it's
You
it's
know, like
not happening at GDC, it's happening around GDC,
no.
right? So it's one of those important things that kind of falls out of the formal kind of capture and narrativization. And I do think one of the things GDC is trying to do is kind of figure out how it can recapture some of that for itself. Like I do think, I know I haven't looked enough at
Mm-hmm.
the schedule to see this, but there's a bigger emphasis on networking. I think there's kind of adjacent events scheduled at some of the five-star hotels, which will not do much for the people I hang out with, but I imagine if you are like
What?
an actual wheeler or dealer in the industry, that's your bag probably. Interesting though, have you looked at the floor map?
No. Like I
It's
don't go to the expo ever, so it's no.
what? Um,
Too cool for that shit.
the floor map is radically so usually it's kind of that whole underground area is like
Mm-mm.
booths of all sorts of different sorts. That's been chopped almost in half.
No
So
way.
a massive shrinking of the kind of open booth areas
Oh.
and replaced with this thing, the GDC Commons, which is where that's where like the state of the industry panel I'm going to be on is happening, and then some other areas. And I don't know if these are conceived as networking spaces or what, but
Hmm.
like how there just was like hundreds of little companies like showing up trying to sell you everything from like 3D assets to handling your waterfall microtransactions more efficiently,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and
Oh yeah.
that footprint has been drastically reduced. I'm very curious about whether that was a front loaded decision
Hmm.
or if people are pulling back. Right? I don't
That's
know. I don't
really
have
interesting.
insight, but
Now
yeah, you
look,
gotta look at the map, man. Be a historian.
I know that you're totally correct. I mean, you reminded me of everything that happened with E3, right? It used to be this whole thing, and then it became a smaller thing, and then there was like really the activity was in the hotel lobbies everywhere. This was always in LA. Then there was that one year where they had it scattered around because they didn't do the main hall. They had all these like separate venues. It was just a disaster. And then in the later years, you would have like Nintendo and EA setting up their own show at some like adjacent building or structure, some venue. And so there's always an interesting sense. So if even so, the argument around E3 was consumers and mobile have shifted, and so it's still relevant to have all these sort of retail focused shows. Probably not. The fact that GDC is changing so dramatically. I mean, the
Yeah.
dates and the schedule, the footprint, like you're describing, there's also clear to me that a lot of people are just purposefully not coming to GDC because it's very prohibitively expensive, and like, what are you really getting
And
out of this?
internationally way down, right? No one wants to try
Mm,
getting into America right now. It's a fucking
say less,
disaster.
say less. It's
Like
like,
you know, we've got like, grannies in the UK saying they were detained by ICE, by border patrol for like, weeks. Like
yeah,
nobody wants to risk that, especially if you're coming from like a, I mean, it doesn't matter where you're coming from at this point, right? The whole thing feels incredibly dicey. So, yeah, a lot going
it's
on.
a shit show. I mean, yeah,
Um,
way to hurt the economy. But I mean, it's to the degree, it's like it's a shift in the games industry as well, and this just
yeah,
is a catalyst for all of that. I mean, we could set up a whole tree around the H-1B visas the same way. It's like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that's not
But so
working out. But
the big recap here is that you want to come hunt me down, you can find me Monday 4:30 to 5:30 at What's New in Game History, or Wednesday March 11th. I'll be at the GDC Commons stage from 3 to 4. And
mm.
then if you want to find Yoast, you're just going to have to look for a cipher dressed all in black, moving
Look
from
for a
CEO
middle-aged white guy
ballroom
in
to
a shirt,
CEO ballroom. So
easy to spot in a crowd of like,
yeah, yeah. If you catch him
yeah.
late at night, he'll be trying to bum a cigarette off me. That's
It's
all right.
always good fun.
Do we want
Yeah,
to get
I'm
on
excited.
to the topic of today's show?
Yeah, speaking of transitions,
Woo!
what have we learned? We've learned that Xbox is making a huge change in its management structure.
Yeah.
Specifically, out of the blue, seemingly, Phil Spencer is retiring after 28 years or so at Microsoft, sort of working his way up. And not just Phil, also several of key executives, most notably Sarah Bond, and they're gone. They're out as of Monday. So this is last Monday. And they're going to be replaced. They're going to be replaced by somebody from Core AI. So after decades of working at Microsoft and being the CEO for Xbox since 2014, I believe, so a substantial amount of time. He's Phil Spencer's seen this division through all these transitions, through all these acquisitions. It's really grown from about $9 billion to about 20, $25 billion in annual revenue under his leadership. He was the one who convinced Satya Nadella to make the Minecraft purchase, which was the first acquisition that Satya Nadella, the CEO for
Mm,
Microsoft, did. It was the first time he went to ask the board for a bunch of money to buy a game, and that proved to be this
yeah.
monumental success for everybody. So it earned Phil Spencer, a seat at the round table at Microsoft, sort of like the board of directors that directly reports to the CEO. So it's all very honorary and prestigious and clearly accomplished. He's now suddenly being rolled out, including some of his key executives, and being, sort of at a surprise, right? It's not just the fact that he's up and out, it's also the appointment of someone by the name of Asha Sharma, who I haven't met, but she previously ran Microsoft's Core AI product division. And so, it indicates a monumental or, a clear transitional moment in Xbox legacy. And I have some thoughts about what that means for the future, but if nothing else, like, how does this register on your end? Like, what do you make of this? Like, is this in your mind like, oh, whatever, some executive gets swapped out for the next one? Is that a big deal, or is this historically? Can you think of any historical precedents where this type of circumstance meaningfully impacted the course of an organization, of a publisher, of a game maker? You're the
Yeah.
historian here. Like, what do you have for us on this?
So when I was thinking about this, I kind of I was. I mean, yeah, it shocked me as much as everybody else, and I kind of folded back to. I was trying to think about like where is the industry now and how do we situate this kind of change, not just in the context of Microsoft, but in kind of this larger sense of industry transformation. And it kind of what it brought up for me is I started remembering this. I'm gonna tell a little story, and I think it will arc
Ooh,
back into this. But there was you know the Sierra Online project that I've worked on for a long time. That was part of my dissertation work. One of the interviews I did for that was with this guy named Mike Brochu, and almost no one has ever heard of Mike Brochu. He was the COO and president of Sierra in the early to mid 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And he was brought on, I think, in 1993. He had no background in games, but he was brought in maybe like 5 years post IPO to try and, the entire industry was under a dramatic transformation, right, during this time in the 90s. I think we kind of forget this in our contemporary period, but there was all of this uncertainty about like what was the future of games going to be, and nobody knew. And so everyone was kind of casting, you didn't know where the next horizon of growth was. And so what they did at Sierra was they converted their plan to kind of an acquisition plan, right? Gobble up
Mm-hmm.
studios, Papyrus, Cocktail Vision, Impressions, Sublogic, right? It looked like expansive expansion and diversification, but it was really this kind of philosophical shift where the company
Mm-hmm.
stopped being organized around a kind of creative studio, philosophy, and more about being a holding company of software assets, right? Um,
Ooh, I like that.
and
That's,
you know, and there's a whole series of kind of ripple effect transformations, right? The point of this was to create a company that could then be acquired by someone bigger, right? And that happened. Sierra Online in 1996 gets acquired by CUC International. That for about $1 billion. That CUC was a consumer services conglomerate. It ran consumer membership clubs, subscription programs. And why the hell was it buying a game company? Because it thought that, there was some kind of intersection between online commerce and interactivity that owning game companies would put it on the cutting edge of, right? So suddenly Sierra is in this larger infrastructure that's subordinate to this bigger economic narrative about kind of network services and where they were going.
mm-hmm.
And then that just keeps escalating, right? So then Sierra's holding company, CUC, merges with a company called HFS, Hospitality Franchise Systems, in 1997. And that was a company that owned Howard Johnson, Ramada, Days Inn, rental cars, real estate, mortgage brokerages, right? A whole bunch of shit that also still has nothing to do with games.
It's like, wow.
But but it was still, suddenly Sierra is owned by the same company that owns a bunch of mid-tier hotels, right? And it sounds absurd, but it keeps becoming this model of
Dude.
abstraction, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the company is increasingly becoming a kind of financial instrument, and its industry specificity doesn't really matter. In the Sierra case, there's this really kind of historically unprecedented thing that happens, which is that it gets discovered that CUC had been cooking its books, that it
Mm-hmm.
had not actually ever been producing the profits it had claimed. It's the biggest embezzlement scandal prior to Enron, or the biggest corporate fraud prior to Enron, and the whole thing craters, right? And basically, the company starts looking for things to liquidate, right? And so the game stuff becomes immediately, it's like this has no core business market purpose, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then a whole bunch of kind of goofy stuff happens, right? Sierra gets sold to a company called Havas, which was like a
Mm-hmm.
French PR and
Avast
advertising
Interactive, yeah.
firm. Yeah, and then it gets folded into Vivendi. Vivendi had originally been a French water utility until it became a global media and telecom conglomerate. And so, by the early 2000s, Sierra is inside this company that's like music labels, film studios, television holdings, right? And its
Mm-hmm.
institutional identity is effectively gone, right? The brand resurfaces as a publishing label, but it doesn't have any internal coherence. From Vivendi, it gets acquired by Blizzard, right? Or Activision Blizzard, right? As part of that, Blizzard, when Vivendi merges its games division with Activision, right? It becomes
Mm-hmm.
Activision Blizzard. Sierra is hoovered up into that. As we know, this does not lead to any kind of resurrection for Sierra, right? Although Activision tries in the 2010s, right? But it's just kind of this like stack of IP rights sitting inside this larger company. And
In
weirdly,
the
where this
freezer.
all comes to rest is Microsoft, right? By 2023, right? And so, um, right, Microsoft acquires Activision Blizzard for like what 69, 70 bill, and so this arc that had started as Sierra trying to become kind of business first in the 90s culminates with it now living inside of one of the largest tech companies in the world. And there's a story there about going from a founder led creative studio to a kind of acquisition machine to a consumer services asset to a hotel conglomerate to like just another piece of IP acquisition. And
Hmm.
I think the reason I think about this along the same trajectory as the Activision, Xbox, Microsoft is that you're seeing this same kind of decay of the nesting doll, right? That's happening, right? It's that like, once Sierra's internal logic really shifted from making games to accumulating assets, its fate became progressively more abstract. And I think you're sort of seeing, like, for me, this feels like a kind of like there's a historical synchronicity that's happening here where okay, suddenly now the games division is being run by the AI person. Like why? And it's coming out of this kind of anxiety about we don't know where the future of growth is, right?
Hmm.
And so what's going on at kind of Xbox slash Activision, all tucked inside of Microsoft, right? One, I'm interested in observing kind of historically what happens when these macroeconomic structures shift and like what games are become hot
Hmm.
potatoes for larger assets. And I think that's exactly what we saw in the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard, right?
Hmm.
At one point, the whole theory was that this was all for the cloud, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, well, that seems to be taking a big dump. So what was this all for? And also, how games negotiate periods of identity rupture, right? Because this is kind of it's across the whole industry that I think that you know games when the larger economic sense of certainty begins to collapse, games lose their identity pretty fast, and they start to get kind of hoovered up into these larger models of like games are going to allow us to do X in this new environment, or games are going to bring like this model of interactivity to this new economic form, and that is like just never worked for one, right? I don't think we've ever seen that actually successfully implemented, right? The future of online shopping was not somehow games adjacent in the 90s. The future of cloud was not has not been baked into games. The future of like crypto and blockchain has not been games first. And now it's like, what do we think we're doing with this kind of AI conversion, right? I mean, it's hard for me to see a future where Activision feels like it even has an identity anymore. Now that it's inside of Xbox, and like, what is Xbox becoming, right? If it's just a mechanism inside of Microsoft to further
Hmm.
Microsoft's own aims.
I
And
love it.
it doesn't, it's not like a thesis, but it's kind of a way of looking at similarities in patterns during times of kind of macroeconomic restructuring, right?
Hmm. Hmm. That was very helpful. I remember the nesting dolls of the Sierra trajectory, and I like that precedent because it's sort of how the industry has been consolidating for the last decade, right? During the pandemic and even before, it was all about just building up muscle, having inventory in terms of IP catalogs, and being becoming effectively too big to fail, or insulating yourself from like whatever the currents in the industry and in demand and so on. Yeah, that was sort of everybody's thing. It hasn't worked out for a lot of them. I think I mean, you mentioned Vivendi. Vivendi was also a majority shareholder in Ubisoft, and it was really just a toxic relationship between those two
Yeah,
companies. And part
yeah,
of why Ubisoft was eventually better off being independent, of course, only to then quickly sell a bunch of its shares to Tencent, but whatever, that's another conversation. It's that large conglomerate ownership is very apersonal, it's very spreadsheet driven. And so
yep,
that brings me to the current event, which, it seemed that what Xbox used to have, I mean, AI, we've covered this when we spoke to Julian Tegelius and other podcasts, but AI has always been part of the game industry. It's been there for decades. Machine learning, natural language processing, and procedural content generation, all of those things are endemic to gaming. And so AI, to use an umbrella term, was always sort of in service of games. What's changing with this in this moment is that gaming is now in service of AI again, and kind of to your point,
absolutely.
right? And so seeing the former product leader for Core AI getting the job, there's going to be I've met some of the incoming execs already, and I'm not disclosing anything proprietary, but they seem like they're very nice, well-meaning people. I don't know them well enough to say that they are going to be amazing or terrible. It's not really. Well, the market will prove it out. But there is a conversation where I was like, okay, so now we have this sort of more conglomerate style approach of management. Is that going to benefit a creative wing, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's $20 billion a year out of the trillions that Microsoft generates, is
And if
that
your
going to
orient
be a benefit or not?
yeah, and if your orientation is like, if what your business model is how to make money off of AI, which is that even happening anywhere, right? What And you bring that to games, now what happens, right? Just when games were still physical goods, it could kind of make sense to me. Just bring in a physical good. That was often their idea. Was like, well, just bring in somebody who knows physical goods, right? It doesn't have to be games,
Hmm.
and see what we can make happen here. And now it foreshadows not just a shift in kind of management background, but often where they think the profit is going to come from, and that's going to, hold on. Um,
Is that the corporate sound?
yes, yes.
Um, the,
What do you think Xbox? What are some of your predictions for where what are the
uh,
different possible outcomes here?
yeah, it's a good. I have two
And over
scenarios.
like a long arc, let's say 5, 10 years, what do
Yeah.
we?
So the short version is this is the beginning of the end for the Xbox legacy. I think they're going to divest it, not all at once, but in parts. So the hot take is that
Is
uh,
that an original? Is anyone else predicting that? Is that an
I
original
have
hot take? Unique
yes,
to unboxing?
you heard it here first. And so I've been thinking about this for a week now, right? So like this news drops last week, and then everybody and their mother calls you and like, what do you think? I think this, that, whatever, and you kind of compare notes. And
Nobody called me. Go on.
I called you. This is why are you always the victim? Jesus. That's why I wanted to hear the historical perspective because it seems so. So my problem with the conversations, of course, is people have a very sort of emotional reaction, like, "Well, this is crazy because," blah, blah, blah. And the explanations, of course, like I mean, I'll just lay it out simply. It's like, oh, here's a woman of color that's going to now be running a big game company. Let's all have the most predictable reaction to this because that will never stand. She's only played 12 hours of Xbox on her profile, and so therefore she is totally unsuited for blah, blah, blah. You're like, okay. And also, Strauss Zelnick, the CEO of the most successful game franchise and game publisher in the world, today says the same thing. It's like, I'm not the gamer in chief, I'm the boss. I'm supposed to make this happen. And so, all of those conversations have been had. They've sort of washed over all of your different social feeds, and you're like, okay, well, what's actually in place here? And the fact that it's very sudden is, I think, not a response to the fact that Game Pass was not doing so hot. I think Game Pass is kind of fine. It makes money, as long as it makes a 30% margin. Nadella's not really going to touch it for now. They're going to optimize it. They just introduced new pricing tiers. So, whatever, it's going to be business as usual. It's going to be a lot of meetings that will would have been better off as emails. That's it's just sort of a corporation moving its mass forward. On the long term, however, I think what's going to happen is that the cost that Microsoft is incurring in investing in AI is going to have to be paid off somehow, right? And that
And it's
inevitable
not going to
market
be paid
correction.
through through new profits in games. Like, it's just not going to
Well,
happen.
let's say that it does. Let's say that it makes
Okay. Okay.
30% margin, right, on a $20 billion business. So now we're talking $6, $7 billion a year. It's like that's nothing. The anticipated cash burn for OpenAI between 2026 and 2029 is $218 billion alone. So okay, so here comes Microsoft, and it's like, or here comes Xbox, but like, here's a little bit of money. It's like it doesn't even dent
Yeah.
that whole thing. So then it's a matter of like, okay, what assets do we have that we can sell at a premium that are going to be, significant? And so one example I've been playing with is what happens with mobile, where Microsoft has, of course, King Digital as its main inroad. That's its biggest asset there. Mobile is turning over, right? King Digital this week with Candy Crush was elapsed by a newcomer. I forget the name now, but it's some kind of soap series game. It's this newcomer mobile game that makes more money than Candy Crush, right? Out of nowhere is this incumbent sort of finding competitors in a new space. Investment in companies like Loom Games by Scopely, which is sort of the nature of things now, where you have an 8-month-old company valued at $1 billion being gobbled up slowly, piece by piece, by these incumbents that focus on user acquisition rather than content creation and that type of stuff. That's the name of the game. In that context, something like King Digital could be a very valuable asset for, let's say, PIF or Scopely, right? Or perhaps a Tencent. And so then a mobile unit that generates $3 billion a year or so could be valued at a multiple of that. And so now suddenly I have 15, $20 billion that I can put towards paying off my AI expenses. So that's where I think this is going to go. They're going to optimize the pieces that work. They're going to sell off whatever they can to pay down the cost incurred by AI. Microsoft is so hard up on all things Sam Altman that the moment, I mean, they're the tallest trees. So the moment the currents change, the moment the wind changes, they will have a whiplash effect, and that's going to reverberate across the organization. And they're going to look at games and say, guess what?
Yep.
We're going to
This
cut
is
this.
we need to liquidate, right? This is not
And
core
so
business.
it's not core business, and you're worth more to us dead, basically, or whatever, sold. And so they're going to divest it one piece at a time, but that's the beginning of
Oh,
the end. So that's the hot take. Xbox will probably go the way of Sega, right? Something like they get out of the hardware business, and then it's just going to be
this is
IP, and then you sort
the
of sell some of
wildest
it off.
conversation I was not ready for at 11 a.m.,
Yeah,
man.
listen. I'm
Um,
back. I'm back from the beach. I'm ready. Let's go.
oh man, I mean, it feels correct, right? Like putting my like long form, multi-decade game history hat on. It's like that does feel like the beginning. This is not some sort of like innovative moment where Xbox is going to reinvent it all. I don't feel that. I feel like
Hmm.
this is the beginning of a great unspooling that began with this kind of overly, uh, you know, this kind of this opportunistic acquisition
Hmm.
um, that you know, uh, big sigh, big sigh. Um, Also,
Listen,
the game
I
that
hope it
made
works out.
and Candy Crush was
Hmm.
Gossip Harbor, which looks
That's right.
awful.
Listen,
This looks like every
I
other game that looks exactly like this. It's a match
it's the
whatever with a story. There's a lot of
no
other
no no.
games that have run in this model, and this maybe tells us more about kind of the flagging of Candy Crush than the success of or how amazing Gossip Harbor is as an
Gossip
experience.
Harbor is fantastic. So I played the first 12 seconds, and it goes as follows: the narrative economy introduces itself with a bad husband and and Quinn, this lady with a child in the middle, and of course Quinn ends up getting custody. It's sort of like this little like court scene,
This
and
is
so she and
already
then
elaborate.
as Quinn walks back to wherever the hell they live, with the child, they find their house and their restaurant in tatters. And the first piece of dialogue goes, I still can't believe those rioters destroyed my restaurant. And so I've gone in 7 seconds from a full divorce and like, divvying up of childhood, of child custody. And then we get to like rioters destroying the restaurant. So we're like finding this person at like the worst time of their lives. Was it because of the food poisoning? She asked herself. Well, the most important thing is to find out who's trying to sabotage me, and we're off. That's the game. That's the
So
narrative
just like
threat.
conspiracy theory plus
It's
like
just, it's just
BLM
fantastic.
pro Palestine, and you just like bring it like hoover up
Just
the
everything. Every,
that feels like an AI slop narrative, right? It's like take
listen,
all of contemporary cultural events and put the oh god, what a
it's so
nightmare.
good. It's so
What a
good.
nightmare. And so the
And so,
narrative will just progress as a series of increasingly kind of the moving target
mhm.
conspiracy theories. Quinn, is it the Epstein files? Like,
Listen, I can't wait to see what happens in the next content drop. I don't, but it's like, but this is the kind of game that we're talking about. It's like it's just off the rails. So I just want to see how they're going to get this, move this forward. So thank you for reminding me of the name. That's fantastic. So I think overall, like the industry is, the sort of the button is like it's a massive transition, right? It's a moment where we're going to see a lot of changes. Um, you know, Xbox is not alone. Like the larger question here is like, what does this mean for the rest of the industry?
Yeah.
Because Matt Ball did his annual deck earlier last week or so, and it was basically saying like the largest eight mature markets in the global games economy are exactly that. They're mature and kind of flat. Growth is coming from Asia. Okay, so that switches the gravity point fundamentally in the industry. What does that mean long term? Who's capturing that value kind of thing? Where does the money flow after this? There's a lot of large scale macro trends happening, and companies are trying to figure that out.
Yep.
In that context, like Xbox is just like everything else. We see Sony getting out of the TV making business, right? They sold their TV making, their manufacturing to TCL, a Chinese company. What does that mean? Does that is that a precursor for the PlayStation division? Are they going to get out of hardware? What is I have no information on this, but you see sort of like large trillion dollar companies make these massive changes in their fundamentals of their business. So we're going through this prolonged transition that's going to be, shedding jobs left and right, and capital, of course, as well. So there's a lot of insecurity coming up.
Yeah.
Exciting times.
Woo. Yeah. And yeah, we got a front row seat, man. Buckle up. Unboxing 2036 going to have a lot to say about it.
Unbuckling 2026. Yeah.
Yeah, or why is it this podcast called Capture That Value?
mm.
There's a whole kind of thesis inside that phrase.
hmm
Yes, do we
I
have
like it.
time for a brief little exit ticket before we run, or
Okay, so let's see. This is one that's sort of tangentially related in my mind. So I discussed the industry basics a few weeks ago, and one of the exit tickets that more recently then popped up was a conversation around Nintendo, right? And it's sort of the branding, and I'm curious what you think of this. But so the question is, I really enjoyed the mention of the Wii console during the discussion when we talked about the classic Mario Kart. The Wii was a big part of my childhood, so I was curious why Nintendo chose to completely move away from the Wii brand instead of evolving into something more compact or hybrid like the current Switch line. So what do you make of that? Like, like what's the why is there a beginning and an end to the Wii franchise here?
I mean, I guess my initial answer to that question would be that they did, um, right? Like that they actually like iterated and improved it with the Switch, right? It's not a that like if you pull back, that's actually the arc, right?
So it's a precursor or prototype for the Switch,
Or I
particularly
mean,
the Wii U.
I as a historian, I would not label that kind of intentionality into it, but I think that what
hmm
they discovered with the Wii was a kind of reinvention of play that Nintendo has always been really successful at, right?
hmm
I guess I know less about the Wii U and what internal division um, decisions led to the release of that console. Why did it kind of not propel the thing
hmm
that had been successful? And I suspect I don't know the internal decision making there, but I suspect it feels to me like that's like internal company dissension or
hmm
putting money on the wrong horse sort of. But like they actually what's interesting is the course correction, right?
hmm
Is that like the Wii U sinks like a stone, and actually
hmm
they kind of reinvent the model of play again in something that also converges with their other super most successful platform, which is the DS, right? And so the
hmm
Switch becomes that. It's like that whole package is the Switch, right? And so I would say you actually do see that extension
hmm
if you kind of pull the zoom back enough.
Interesting. I think you're correct. The way that I would answer this is to say like they did extended. They followed through on this idea of handheld gaming, but they made a few hard choices, right? So one of them was to collapse both their separate handheld 3DS business line and their console, sort of like your living room console, into one device, which was a great big success with the Switch. But what would it have looked like if they had continued to have two separate devices, right? Would that have? And so some investors and Wall Street analysts at the time would argue there's like, oh, well, the numbers look good because we've merged two businesses into one. Neither of them would have these great sales figures if it was kept separate. So that was a hard call, and I think it was the right one in the end, of course. But that's certainly true. And as a result, they had to reposition themselves. So the second thing they did was to just get rid of the brand that everybody associated with the failure. Right? The Wii
Yeah.
U has become this. It's like second only to the Virtual Boy, I think, in the Nintendo in the
It's a
Nintendo
joke
history.
console, right? Or like
Yeah,
the whatever the last Sega was, like
the Sega Mega Drive. I still think that if you sell 14 million of anything, dude, that's amazing, but not amazing enough for Nintendo fans, of course. I'll be sure to ask Reggie. He's coming. I should plug this eventually. At the end of the semester, we have a guest speaker coming in. It's a collaboration with the Me Too, with the Game Center, and everybody
oh,
else.
amazing.
We have Reggie Fils-Aimé coming into my class to do a fireside. So we should start putting together questions around this. I like this.
All right. Yost, we all got to get going, but hope everybody enjoyed the hottest take on the market today. And join us again next week. And yeah, maybe we'll see some of y'all at GDC. Thanks for listening, as always. Good night and good game. Unboxing, Play and Profit for the Gaming Curious is an independent production by Joost van Dreunen and Lane Nooney. Our producer is Keaton Ireland. Our logo was designed by Moira Zhang. For more from Unboxing, subscribe to our newsletter at buttondown.com/unboxingpodcast. Unboxing episodes can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and wherever else you get your content.